West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Despite the bombastic allegations from Donald Trump and his allies, the Biden administration's Department of Justice, presently under the leadership of Merrick Garland, has so far run its investigation into the former president's handling and storing of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago by the book. On Thursday, the DOJ set in motion a partial appeal of a federal judge's decision to appoint a special master and temporarily block the department's access to the documents and materials seized from Trump's home. The department argued that preventing their access to these materials could hurt not only their criminal investigation, but could harm national security. They even hinted at the possibility that Trump could still be holding on to classified records, writing the injunction against using classified records in the criminal investigation could impede efforts to identify the existence of any additional classified records that are not being properly stored, which itself presents the potential for ongoing risk to national security. From what the DOJ has said publicly and through their filings, they are working through this investigation in a methodical manner, and they're not motivated by political bias. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has resorted to his usual defense, hurling wild and baseless accusations. In response to the DOJ's filing on Thursday, the former president took to his own social media platform to accuse the FBI and the DOJ of leaking, lying, and planting evidence. For weeks now, Trump and his allies have been trying to paint the department's investigation as a partisan hit job by the Biden administration. And that certainly seems like blatant projection, considering Trump spent his time as president frequently calling for investigations into his perceived enemies and attempting to use the DOJ as a weapon to carry out his wishes. And in a new book from former United States Attorney Geoffrey Berman, obtained by the New York Times, we are seeing more allegations of Trump doing exactly that. According to the book, Trump DOJ officials allegedly attempted to pressure Berman and the Southern District of New York to scrub mentions of, quote, individual one, also known as Donald Trump, from charging papers for Michael Cohen, his former personal lawyer. Trump officials also allegedly tried to pressure Berman and the SDNY to open an investigation into former Secretary of State John Kerry, with whom Trump was angry for trying to preserve the Iran nuclear deal. According to Berman, Trump's DOJ sought to use their power to support Trump politically and to pursue his critics. He writes, quote, the conduct that had annoyed the president was now a priority of the Department of Justice. No one needed to talk with Trump to know what he wanted. You could just read his tweets. Donald Trump not so subtly dropping the hint of what he wants and then his allies doing it without being directly asked? Funny enough, that's exactly how Trump's former personal attorney Michael Cohen described working for him. Joining me now is my friend, Michael Cohen. He's the host of the Mea Culpa podcast, and he's the author of the new book, Revenge, How Donald Trump Weaponized the United States Department of Justice Against His Critics. Michael, you're always welcome on the show, and it makes me happy to have you here today. As soon as I read that New York Times article about Geoffrey Berman's new book, and I saw that you are specifically named in it, you knew I had to have you on the show to ask, what's your response to these new allegations by Berman about Trump's politicization of the Justice Department?
Yeah, so interesting. Your previous guest, Matt, was talking about how politicians use the power of their office in order to advance themselves. Well, Geoffrey Berman, as the head of the criminal division for the Southern District of New York, did exactly the same thing. So he just needs to expand that. It's not just politicians. It's anyone in these elected official seats. When I saw it, I have to be honest, I'm wondering why Geoffrey Berman hasn't been indicted, why he hasn't lost his law license. I want you to think about this, Katie, because this is the part that really angered me the most. He is the head of the criminal division. He's being pressured by the Attorney General of the United States of America on behalf of the President of the United States of America to do things which are improper/illegal. And yet he doesn't notify anyone. He keeps it to himself for 5 years now? So he has something to write about in a book? I mean, that to me is improper. That to me is not doing your job and what you swore an oath to. And so why he is not being... Look, I've already spoken to, right after seeing the article, I reached out to my counsel, Andy Laufer and Jeff Levine. And one of the things I said is, why are we not including Geoffrey Berman in the Bivens action that I have against the United States government, Bill Barr, Donald Trump, the Department of Justice, etc.? And why are we not adding Geoffrey Berman in, considering this dope just basically implicated himself in, what we'll call a scheme? A scheme to scrub my, charges that were levied against me, some of which are absolutely lies, but to scrub Donald's name from those charges so that he could claim it had nothing to do with him. It was only about Michael Cohen. Interestingly enough, I had sent to you, there is an entire set of paragraphs in my upcoming book, Revenge. It's actually page 95 that I sent to you. That touches on this exact point. This is exactly what Trump would do. This is exactly the actions that someone like Geoffrey Berman should not have allowed to happen.
Michael, let's talk about your lawsuit you just mentioned a minute ago. You've brought against Donald Trump, the DOJ, Bill Barr, among others. You just mentioned that perhaps Geoffrey Berman should be a defendant in that lawsuit. Let's be clear. A federal judge agreed with you that the Trump administration put you back in prison in retaliation for writing your first book exposing Trump and for speaking out against him on social media. I can't think of a clearer example of the weaponization of the Department of Justice. I mean, how do you think Berman's book and the lifting of the curtains now will actually help your lawsuit?
Well, I think it completely it validates what I had written in my book, with the new book, Revenge. I believe it validates virtually everything that I am saying, especially as it relates to the Southern District of New York. I pulled this one paragraph out, and I really just wanted to go through it with you because I think this kind of explains what Donald Trump does. Is he uses the things he knows that he has done, believing that everybody is corrupt. He believes that he can now deflect and to say, oh, look at the Biden administration. Look at what they're doing. They're weaponizing the Justice Department against me, making himself the victim. It's not true. This is exactly what he does. But one of the things that I had wrote in here is that through Berman, despite the fact he recused himself from my case, that wasn't enough for Trump. Since Trump appointed Berman to this position, he believed Berman owed him loyalty, which included acquiescing to Trump's desire to silence me through incarceration. And the more I cooperated and provided damning information to the government about Trump, the greater Trump's need to silence me grew. I mean, talk about prescient. This is exactly what Geoffrey Berman is acknowledging that was going on. He just didn't want to be involved with it, and so he stepped away. That's not his right to do. He's being pressured by the top law enforcement agent in the United States and by the most powerful person in the United States. And by the way, this is exactly what Katie, this is exactly what Judge Eileen Cannon is doing as well with the documents that we all know are, not belonging to Donald Trump and should not have been stored at Mar-a-Lago.
Let's talk about the most powerful person in the country at the time, which was Donald Trump, and his right-hand guy at the time, which would have been originally Jeff Sessions and then Bill Barr. Mm-hmm. You've testified and spoken out publicly about Donald Trump's kind of mafia boss-style way of demanding things. Barr, like you, served at Trump's direction. But Barr was the Attorney General of the United States, Michael, and he had almost unlimited and unchecked power. He's now on something of a redemption tour, publicly denouncing Trump's position on the Mar-a-Lago search and saying the federal judge ordering the special master, you just mentioned her, Eileen Cannon, got it all wrong. What are your thoughts about Bill Barr specifically acting at the behest of Donald Trump and using the DOJ to be able to go after people like you who are critics of the Trump administration and Trump?
Right. Too little, too late, especially in terms of what he's doing. He's really not taking the position that he should be doing. He should be coming clean. He should actually demand that, like the House Oversight Committee or one of the intelligence committees, interview him, and he should come clean on everything that he did for Donald Trump. But he won't do that. He won't do it for several reasons, mostly because he's a coward and because it would then implicate him in a series of crimes and illegal actions. That's what he should be doing. Instead, him sitting there eating a hamburger or jovial saying, "Oh, I told Donald Trump you lost the election." Right. And, he goes, but the guy didn't want to listen. That's not going to exonerate him from all of the things that he did working for it. Remember, that was only like 2 weeks prior to the end of Trump's administration. It's like I said, it's too little, too late, and it's not enough. If he really wants to do like what I did, people always, especially on social media, these maggots, they're constantly attacking me. Oh, you know more, you should have given more. I gave 400 plus hours to 9 different congressional committees and law enforcement agencies prior to anything. So the fact that they turn around and say, "Oh, well, you know more. Believe me, when I say that I have been asked thousands of questions and I have provided answers, the ones that I know, I have provided answers to each and every one of these questions and provided whatever documentation that I had within which to support the statements that I made. This man comes out and he basically wants to be invited back into polite society. Why? Because he acknowledged that Joe Biden won the election? Big freaking deal. Stop. It's enough. Come clean, Bill.
It is Monday, the 12th of September of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and also, I should mention, in a period of mourning still, because of, well, as they like to say, superior English breeding. And our daily special in this fabulous salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is River City Hash Mondays. That's right, it's because a weekend preceded Monday. And, there's always a little tidbits here and there left over. And, we repurpose it into a gourmet delight for your gourmet delight. Welcome. All right. Well, did you hear the Queen died? Yeah, I know you did. Can't get away from it. Oh, my God. I just wish that they could have, spent a minute on Joe Biden's Save Democracy speech, okay? But the passing of a monarch, oh, no, we got to give weeks and weeks of coverage for it. Oh, my God. Well, maybe it is being pushed out of the news cycle because you know how Americans are. They bore easily. And quickly, too, for the most part. Democracy? Boring! We want something new. Yeah, and then they get something new and they go, what? They didn't teach us that in school. Well, you know what? If you had been in school instead of watching TV, little brats. And here we are. Okay. Well, here we are on a Monday, and yes, there was video of Trump flying into D.C. in the middle of the night, as if he was in quite a hurry. He was even in his spiked golf shoes, coming off the plane, hurrying up, and we still haven't heard anything. I had made a speculation that possibly we would hear, the only way we would hear about indictments is if Trump rage tweeted about it after midnight. And it's been silence, radio silence. No, I've heard some analyses from those who know that could be even worse. I mean, for Danny, which means then it could be worse for us. Because you know why he stole those secret documents, not just to sell them to make a few bucks, but also to get a out-of-jail-free card. Because that's how Donnie works. He had the apparatus of the military-industrial complex at his fingertips, and all that implies. And if he wanted dirt on somebody, he could get it quite easily. Because that's how it works when you're a mobster. And now he accuses everybody of doing what he does. Because everybody is as corrupt as he. And all you have to do is look around, and you look around him, and there's like quite a few hypocritical, corrupt personages in the Trump orbit. So why not criminalize the damaged son of the President of the United States? Why not steal the diary of the daughter of the President of the United States? And then accuse them of being the real crooks. He must have done something. You know, when you got Trump's kids. I mean, this is like, well, I don't understand what the media is doing or not doing here. Actually, that's being rhetorical. We know exactly what they're doing. We get to hear oblique statements about Hunter Biden all the time. But not once about how was it that Ivanka got all those trademarks in China. How is it that, I mean, even something as, I guess, mundane as poaching on game reserves and then paying off people to get out of the charge of taking endangered species on a game reserve? And then he and his, I don't know, what's up with Kimberly? I'm not going to use the S word. But, she's the one that offered lap dances for big-time bucks from big-time right-wing donors. I'm just saying. They got to fund that cocaine habit somehow. Because I think that Junior's on an allowance. But anyway, I mean, look, poaching animals on game reserves. The only way you hear about that is if we bring it up. And then all the other sundry bits of corruption that just ooze and reek from that orbit. If we stink, everybody stinks. Okay. And then we got this kind of Christianity that says that, if we're made in God's image and we're racist bigots, homophobe, racists, xenophobes, etc., 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 God must be too. Yeah. Oh, my God. Tell that to the Council of Trent. Just try it. All righty. Well, it is a Monday, and I thought that since we live in such criminal times, we'd have, somebody like Michael Cohen, who we have to keep reminding ourselves is kind of a crook himself, But he ought to know. And maybe he's come clean. Maybe he had an epiphany. That's fine. He's got all the street smarts that we need to be able to, and the right accent too, I'm just saying, crooks sound better with a Brooklynese. I think it's Brooklyn. Anyway, and if I've offended anybody in New York because of your borough system, borough this. No, I take it back. Okay, it's Monday. That's my excuse. Alrighty. Once again, why don't we go ahead and get right into what we have in store for you on this fabulous Monday. I'm not even going to tell you what yesterday was. Okay, I will. It's the first games of the season. They didn't count like last Thursday, the first game, did they? Because it's this Sunday. Sunday was kickoff day for pro football. Okay? Just so you know. And shopping. Okay? Shopping. On 9/11, you have to go shopping. Very important. What's in store for us today? The day after all of that, we call it River City Hash Mondays. Here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. As we begin in the Bistro Cafe part, well, the black pastor in Alabama who was arrested by white police officers while watering flowers of a neighbor who was out of town, well, he has filed a federal lawsuit. Yeah, F around, find out. The Commerce Department declared fishery disasters for several West Coast tribes and allocated $17.4 million in disaster assistance in response. And 2 American Indian tribes in South Dakota have joined forces to purchase 40 acres around the Wounded Knee National Historic Landmark. Good thing. Do it before the Bundys find out. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where USAID Administrator Samantha Power urged Sri Lankan authorities to tackle corruption and introduce governance reforms as a way out of its worst crisis in recent memory. And scaled-down celebrations took place in Denmark, marking 50 years on the throne by Queen Margrethe, now the only female monarch in the world. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Radio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link there, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and possibly send us what you might spend on, I don't know, how about an espresso-type coffee drink? If you could send those funds to us once a month, it really helps pay the bills. Well, the ever-increasing cost of the bills, nothing goes down. What's up with that? Anyway, that helps us pay those bills and then allows us to fly under the radar, so to speak, because they still use that technology, and allows us to be a bulwark of resistance against the dark forces arrayed against not only representative democracy in the United States of America, but representative democracy around the world is under threat. And so we are offering a small bulwark against that, and we thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Coincidentally, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, and you can find those show notes and links by going through my Twitter feed. How about that? Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. All right. Oh, yeah, of course, the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library from the last 11 plus years can be found at the Internet Archive, archive.org. Yes, go there. Associated Press staff bring us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. A black pastor who was arrested by white police officers while watering flowers of a neighbor who was out of town filed a federal lawsuit alleging the ordeal violated his constitutional rights and caused lingering problems, including emotional distress and anxiety. Michael Jennings filed the lawsuit Friday night against 3 officers and the central Alabama town of Childersburg, requesting a jury trial and seeking an unspecified amount of money. Jennings' lawyers held a news conference outside the Birmingham Federal Courthouse on Saturday to discuss the lawsuit, and the NAACP, who the staff at Associated Press want you to know, because obviously many don't, is the nation's oldest civil rights organization, that being the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And other groups planned a rally afterward at a downtown park. The suit alleged the actions of officers Christopher Smith and Justin Gable, Sergeant Jeremy Brooks, and the city violated rights protecting against unlawful arrest and guaranteeing free speech. He cited multiple continuing problems, including post-traumatic stress disorder and humiliation. Childersburg City Attorney Reagan Rumsey did not return an email seeking comment because they never do. Jennings, age 56, was arrested in May after a white neighbor called 911 and said a, quote, younger black male, end quote, and a gold SUV were at a house while the owners, who are friends of Jennings and had asked him to watch their house, were away. Jennings identified himself as Pastor Jennings, but refused to provide identification to the officers who arrested him on a charge of obstructing government operations. Is that what jackboots say now? After a 20-minute confrontation that included raised voices on both sides. Filed in municipal court, the charge was dismissed within days at the request of the then police chief. Jennings' attorneys last month released police body camera video that was obtained following our records request to the city. Bernard Similton, president of the Alabama branch of the NAACP, said the officers who arrested Jennings did so many things that were not in line with good community policing tactics. Blakemore of the Washington Post brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. For generations upon generations, the Yurok tribe has relied on Chinook salmon from the Klamath River in northern California for ceremonies, sustenance, and commercial gain. But in 2019, less than 40% of the usual number of salmon returned to the river, resulting in what Tribal Chairman Joseph James called an utter failure of that year's stock. The Yurok tribe is not alone. Between 2014 and 2019, tribal salmon fisheries failed in Washington state rivers too. On the 1st of September, the Commerce Department declared fishery disasters for several West Coast tribes and allocated $17.4 million in disaster assistance in response. The assistance will be used to shore up everything from habitat restoration to commercial and subsistence fishers. West Coast salmon have been under stress for years. After spawning in freshwater rivers, their offspring migrate to the ocean to feed, then generations come back year after year to spawn. Despite management and conservation efforts in some rivers, the number of returning fish is dwindling and uncertain. Researchers blame everything from pollution to river dams that prevent access to spawning grounds to rising ocean temperatures connected to climate change. Some stocks of Chinook salmon have been designated threatened and endangered in their river habitats. Others are considered threatened under the Endangered Species Act. Although fishing treaties vary, many reserve tribal rights to fish in unusual and accustomed places or in waters associated with reservations. Tribes and bands also participate in fisheries management and conservation. The fishery failures not only cut off valuable income sources for tribal entities, but also disrupt traditional uses and even household food sources. Stephen Groves of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 2 American Indian tribes in South Dakota have joined forces to purchase 40 acres around the Wounded Knee National Historic Landmark, the site of one of the deadliest massacres in U.S. history. The Oglala Sioux and the Cheyenne River Sioux said the purchase of the land on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation was an act of cooperation to ensure the area was preserved as a sacred site. More than 200 Native Americans, including children and elderly people, were killed at Wounded Knee in 1890. The bloodshed marked a seminal moment in the frontier battles the U.S. Army waged against tribes. It's a small step towards healing and really making sure that we as a tribe are protecting our critical areas and assets, Oglala Sioux Tribe President Kevin Killer told the AP. The tribes agreed this week to petition the U.S. Department of the Interior to take the land into trust on behalf of both tribes. The Oglala Sioux Tribe will pay $255,000, and the Cheyenne River Tribe will pay $245,000 for the site, Indian Country Today reported. The title to the land will be held in the name of the Oglala Sioux Tribe. Marlis Afraid of Hawk, a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux, whose grandfather, Albert Afraid of Hawk, survived the 1890 massacre as a 13-year-old boy, said she was overjoyed to see the tribes take ownership. She said she carries on the oral tradition of telling the grandchildren how her grandfather survived by fleeing through a ravine after a rifle held by a U.S. cavalry soldier failed to fire at him. Harrowing indeed, and good on them for preserving a sacred site. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, she's going the difference. So the problem with different movies is it's hard to know how to market them. For instance, if you think, based on trailers, that Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, written and directed by Adama Ebo, is a wry satirical comedy mockumentary, then you'll be confused and or disappointed because it's not. The documentary is a spine for the film. Trinity Childs and her husband, Pastor Lee Curtis Childs, are leaders of a Prosperity Gospel Baptist church that has been devastated by Lee Curtis's acts of sexual misconduct. So now the Childs have brought in a film crew to document their comeback. But mixed in with scenes from the documentary perspective are traditional anonymous third-person camera scenes, as well as one extremely expressionistic scene, all of them marked with non-diegetic sound effects. So the mockumentary is just one narrative tool among others that Ebo uses. But since we're not used to seeing all these tools bundled together this way, Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul feels like something different, although its parts are familiar. In spite of its humor, I'm not even sure that it's a comedy. It's no satire, as the film doesn't say much about prosperity gospel evangelism, or sin and trespass, or roads to redemption. If it has a theme, maybe it's a look at the horrible cost of devotion. But if anything, the movie's a character study of our two leads, played to award level by Regina Hall and Sterling K. Brown. When black actors have complained forever that there aren't the parts based in the black experience that offer human characters with depth, intelligence, and nuance so black actors can show their range, these are the types of roles they've wanted, and it took Brown and Hall as producers, along with Daniel Kaluuya and Jordan Peele, executive producer, to make that difference. Praise God, hallelujah. And to make Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul another entry into what is undoubtedly our American black film golden age. Amen to that. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Camilo Garzón. In July, the White House released the first image of the collection of pictures from the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST, during a preview event with President Joe Biden.
6.5 months ago, a rocket launched from Earth, carrying the world's newest, most powerful deep space telescope on a journey 1 million miles into the cosmos. It's a new window into the history of our universe. And today we're going to get a glimpse of the first light to shine through that window.
It was a high-resolution image of a cluster of distant galaxies known as SMACS 0723. It was the deepest, sharpest infrared image of the universe, ever. The image had to be seen to be believed, and on that day, it was everywhere to see and ponder, from the big screen in Times Square to trillions of small screens around the world. But what if you are physically unable to see it?
SMACS 0723. The background of space is black. Thousands of galaxies appear all across the view. Their shapes and colors vary. Some are various shades of orange, others are white. Most stars appear blue and are sometimes as large as more distant galaxies that appear next to them. A very bright star is just above and left of center. It has 8 bright blue long diffraction spikes.
Descriptive, scientific. And if you were unable to see, you would, for the first time, be able to construct a mental image of what the rest of the seeing world saw.
When I think about people listening to the alt text that we write, I want it to be like listening to a book, where you imagine the scene all the characters in the scene, and in these cases it might be galaxies and stars as the characters, all the activity in it.
That's Claire Blum, principal science writer at the Space Telescope Institute in Baltimore, Maryland, the operations center for the Webb telescope. And alt text, as you might have gathered, is an official way to describe and make accessible the contents of an image to someone that might not be able to see it with their own eyes. In 2020, it was estimated that over 1 billion people on Earth live with vision impairment. That's according to the International Agency for the Prevention of Blindness. So, if many millions around the world were following the news of Webb's first image, the number of viewers who actually couldn't view it was likely significant. That image's alt text has likely been heard by multitudes. But alt text can go further than just a visual description. It can even add context to an infographic or a graph that might not be clear to all that take it in, whether by looking at it or listening to it described. At its best, alt text also helps
kind of fill in the gaps for what you might be missing if you can't access the whole image completely.
Margaret Carruthers, also of the Space Telescope Science Institute.
Everyone's perception is different. Details of the science might be evident to an astronomer or a scientist, but it is not going to be immediately evident to a member of the public who does not have that educational background.
That's Claire Blum again.
So that's why it's so important that we had a team of educators and scientists going through and just double-checking us. Did we cover everything, but also did we attempt to describe some of the science?
Both Blum and Carruthers say that alt text represents a merging of science and art. But it's also critical work, because no one should be left out of the experience of taking in our universe in a new way.
For me, it's a bit of awe first, but then, okay, that's the hook. Now you're into this, let me tell you what's here. So then being able to describe, for example, the star at the center of a planetary nebula, and then describing the scene of gas and dust around it, being able to compare it to, wispy or translucent fabrics. Even if somebody hasn't seen fabric blowing in the wind, they perhaps have felt it and understand the differences in the weights of fabrics. But either way, the goal is to paint a picture with the writing to be complete, to provide the whole as much as possible. It's not a one-to-one, but it's providing somebody that same in-depth experience, that opportunity.
A kind of adaptation and translation that still communicates and paints a picture as well as it can. Carruthers agrees.
So in that way, it is very much like a translation where somebody translating poetry might focus on, one word over another to kind of convey the feeling or the intent of the poetry.
For the Webb's first images, they wrote descriptions that were both scientifically accurate, illuminating, and I might even say poetic. Here's Blum reading one of her favorites.
This frame is split down the middle. Webb's mid-infrared image is shown at left, and Webb's near-infrared image on the right. The mid-infrared image appears much darker, with many fewer points of light. Stars have very short diffraction spikes. Galaxies and stars also appear in a range of colors, including blue, green, yellow, and red. The near-infrared image appears busier, with many more points of light. Thousands of galaxies and stars appear all across this view. They are sharper and more distinct than what is seen in the mid-infrared view. Some galaxies are shades of orange, while others are white. Most stars appear blue with long diffraction spikes, forming an 8-pointed star shape. There are also many thin, long orange arcs that curve around the center of the image.
Beautiful. Here's Carruthers reading one of hers.
The background is deep blue with scattered points of light of different size and brightness. Running from left to right through the middle is a jagged line representing a light spectrum, a graph of brightness versus wavelength of light. The area below the spectrum has a rainbow pattern from red on the left to purple on the right. The coloring is semi-transparent. The blue starry background is visible behind and fades out toward the bottom. In the middle, superimposed on the starry background and part of the spectrum, is a large hexagon outlined in gold with 2 hexagonal outlines behind it. Within the hexagon is an illustration of space with shapes representing objects and materials at different distances and points in time that Webb is investigating. A large planet with hints of cloud formation, beams of matter jetting out from the center of a galaxy, galaxies of different shapes and sizes, nebulous cloudy wisps, and stars with 8-pointed diffraction patterns.
Thanks to the team from the Space Telescope Science Institute for describing these jaw-droppingly beautiful images in such a powerful and scientifically accurate way. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Camilo Garzón.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
For generations, workers have been punished by corporate bosses for watching the clock. But now, the corporate clock is watching workers, called digital productivity monitoring. This surveillance is done by an integrated computer system including a real-time clock, camera, keyboard tracker, and algorithms to provide a second-by-second record of what each employee is doing. Jeff Bezos, boss of Amazon, pioneered use of this ticking electronic eye in his monstrous warehouses, forcing hapless, low-paid pickers to sprint down cavernous stacks of consumer stuff to fill online orders pronto. Beat the clock or be fired. Terrific policy, exclaimed taskmasters at hospital chains, banks, tech giants, newspapers, colleges, and other outfits employing millions of mid-level professionals. So they've been installing these unblinking digital snoops to watch their employees, even timing their bathroom breaks and constantly eyeing each one's pace of work. They've plugged in new software with such Orwellian names as WorkSmart and Time Doctor to count workers' keystrokes and to snap pictures every 10 minutes of workers' faces and screens, recording all on digital scoreboards. You are paid only for the minutes the computers, quote, see you in action. Bosses hail the electronic minders as Fitbits of productivity, spurring workers to keep noses to the grindstone and also to instill workplace honesty. Only the whole scheme is dishonest. No employee's worthiness can be measured in keystrokes and 10-minute snapshots. This is Jim Hightower saying employees call this digital management demoralizing, toxic, and just wrong. But corporate investors are pouring billions into it. Which group do you trust to shape America's workplace?
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. Socialist and labor leader Eugene V. Debs was sentenced to 10 years in prison for opposing the United States' involvement in World War I. The Espionage and Sedition Act had been passed a year earlier. This made it a criminal offense to interfere with military recruitment efforts. Debs made a speech at a socialist convention in Canton, Ohio, that was considered a violation of this act. He said, "They have always taught and trained you to believe it is your patriotic duty to go to war and have yourself slaughtered at their command. But in all the history of the world, you, the people, have never had a voice in declaring war." Debs also noted, "The master class has always declared the wars, the subject class has always fought the battles." Debs refused to take the stand in his own defense at his trial. He admitted to obstructing the war effort, saying the war did nothing for working people. Debs ran for president as a socialist in 1920 while in jail. Many of his campaign buttons read, "Convict number 9653. During his run, Debs received 1 million votes. Debs was released from the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary in 1921. Many agreed with his assertion that the working class have never been the ones to profit from war. In 1935, two-time Medal of Honor recipient and U.S. Marine Corps Major General Smedley Darlington Butler published a book titled War is a Racket, which outlined the excesses of the corporate class over the workers. Many look at the 2003 Iraq invasion by President Bush as another example. Halliburton, a multinational corporation, made nearly $40 billion from its involvement in that war. It's doubtful that any working class people have ever made that kind of profit from war.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs of only in the upper 80s, which is quite a reprieve from the brutal scorching that we've had recently. Plentiful sunshine with winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. I should mention that we did have a bit of a drenching overnight from some passing rain squalls, and that is quite a reprieve as well from what we've had. A few passing clouds tonight with lows in the upper 50s. Winds out of the west, northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then some clouds in the morning tomorrow will give way to mainly sunny skies for the afternoon. Highs in only the low 80s. Oh my. Well, that is a good thing. It looks like, oh yes, that's what it is. Ragweed pollen, they say, is moderate right here in Rogue River proper. Something is hitting me. I apologize for the stuffed nose. Our air quality index is moderate at 67 parts per million, though here at the mothership it is actually much better than that. But we will take care, and the daytime UV index is high at level 6. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.02 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 94%. Quite humid. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 78 and partly cloudy with a 100% chance of more royal morning. Paris is 82 and sunny. Rome is 85 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 54 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 68 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 86 and clear. Tokyo is 73 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and mostly cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore to pass the Farallones. And New York, New York is 74 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Christian Francis of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. A visiting U.S. diplomat, urged Sri Lankan authorities to tackle corruption and introduce governance reforms alongside efforts to uplift the country's economy as a way out of its worst crisis in recent memory. And who is this, just everyday visiting diplomat? Well, that would be USAID Administrator Samantha Power, who told reporters that such moves will increase international and local trust in the government's intentions. Assistance alone would not put an end to this country's woes, Power said. I stressed to the Sri Lankan president in my meeting earlier today that political reforms and political accountability must go hand in hand with economic reforms and economic accountability. She said that international investor confidence will increase as the government tackles corruption and proceeds with long-sought governance reforms. As citizens see the government visibly following through on the commitment to bring about meaningful change, that in turn increases societal support for the tough economic reforms ahead. During our 2-day visit, Power announced a total of $60 million in aid to Sri Lanka after meetings with farmers at a rice field in Jaela outside of the capital Colombo on Saturday. She announced $40 million to buy agrochemicals in time for the next cultivation season. Agricultural yields dropped by more than half in the past 2 cultivation seasons because authorities had banned the imports of chemical fertilizers, ostensibly to promote organic farming. She said that according to the World Food Program, more than 6 million people, nearly 30% of the Sri Lanka population, are currently facing food insecurity and require humanitarian assistance. She said an additional $20 million will be given to provide emergency humanitarian assistance to vulnerable families. Sri Lanka has faced its worst crisis after it defaulted on foreign loans, causing shortages of essentials like fuel, medicines, and some food items. It has reached a preliminary agreement with the IMF for a $2.9 billion package to be dispersed over 4 years. However, the program hinges on Sri Lanka's international creditors giving assurances on loan restructuring. Sri Lanka's total foreign debt is more than $51 billion, of which $28 billion must be repaid by 2027.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Scaled-down celebrations took place yesterday, Sunday, in Denmark, marking 50 years on the throne of Queen Margrethe, whose reign is now Europe's longest, following the death of Britain's Queen Elizabeth II. Dampened celebrations were ordered on Friday by the 82-year-old Margrethe, now also the only female monarch in the world, in respect for Britain's late queen, who had died on Thursday at age 96. Margrethe asked her court to adjust Saturday's and Sunday's anniversary program at a short notice, canceling, among other things, her appearance at the Amalienborg Palace balcony to greet throngs of well-wishers, as well as a ride through the Danish capital of Copenhagen in a horse-drawn carriage. Sunday's events included a church service and a lunch hosted by Margrethe on board the Danish royal ship Dannenbrog for the royal couples and presidents from the fellow Nordic countries of Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin là, je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin là, je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.